Hello and welcome to Simcast, the higher education simulation podcast. My name's Lawrence Hill and I'm joined by my regular co-host, Tony Jeremy.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're joined by Josh Johnson, Senior Simulation-Based Education Technician in the School of Health Sciences at UEA. A very warm welcome to Simcast, Josh.
Hi, Josh. Welcome to the
Hello
podcast.
There.
If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a like. Equally so, if you didn't like the episode, give us a dislike, but let us know in the comments why, because we're always keen to improve. To keep up to date with all things Sim, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to check the notification bell. And Simcast is available on all popular streaming platforms.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be exploring the critical but often misunderstood role of the simulation-based education technician.
Yeah, so we're going to call this episode "I'm a Technician, Not a Magician."
Yeah,
a bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's actually a lot of reasoning behind that, isn't there? Because I think some people do think that you can
wave a wand,
pull simulation out of a magic hat sometimes.
Yeah. I saw it on a T-shirt once and went, "That's good." It's not my original idea. I just thought I'd say that.
Just claim it, own it.
I made that T-shirt.
That's a nice T-shirt you made. So Josh is a musicologist, actually, by background, with diverse taste in music, including heavy metal, which I'm a big fan of. He's a creative, lively, charismatic guy, and we're really interested to hear about, what you think makes the simulation technician role unique and challenging. So if you could kind of start us off then, Josh, why do you do what you do? Why are you interested in simulation?
That's a great question, and one that I can unpack over the course of a number of minutes, I think. So I'd never heard of this job or this role until I started doing it effectively. So my background, as you say, is in musicology. I studied for about 4 years at the Royal Holloway, University of London. And I sort of ended up specializing in digital culture, specifically looking at music and emerging technologies and how emerging technologies are interfaced with and also integrated into mainly culture.
We were talking before the podcast about blockchain art, and my brain is still reeling.
Yeah,
I didn't get that. But yeah, so you got.
It's a young kid's game, I think.
So you started there and in music and contemporary culture, and then what?
So I basically needed a job was the long and short of it. And I sort of stumbled across this role and I saw the words simulation and technology and I went, oh, that kind of sounds like something that I would be interested in. Not really, it's like I haven't got any medical background.
Was it what you thought it was initially when you saw simulation and technology? Because we've discussed this before, that simulation is often miscommunicated in different kind of specialisms and areas.
Yeah. I guess my preconceptions of it were very much that it would be a much more sort of hands-on involved in the teaching, if you know what I mean. So more direct technical support. And I think as I've gone on, I've realized that actually it's a lot more back-end support than you might perhaps initially think. But say I thought it was just going to be cables and cameras and say I know live streaming was sort of included in that job description as well. That was mainly to do with our SMOTS system that we have.
So just for context, you came into post just as we had finished the building work here for our new simulation centre. So we'd done simulation within the School of Health Sciences before, but we now had this big simulation centre with a kind of host of new technology as well, as in the camera recording equipment. And then you come on board as one of the kind of technical staff to support the fact that we'd grown significantly in a short period of time.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why the role was, as if I can use the word vague, as it was sort of in the job description, because it was sort of like, we don't know where this is going.
Yeah, I might have had a part to play in the vagueness of that.
Which makes sense now you think about it. Because it was very unclear as to how the simulation technicians would be sort of involved within this centre and what role we were there to play, basically.
I think we were still learning it at the time.
100%.
And I think there was probably a period where, going back to the point that you made about feeling that you were going to be more actively involved, I think there was a discussion at the time that might be a realistic prospect.
Yeah.
We've had we've had another technician on before. We've had Dan Blood.
Yep.
And I think what I have kind of gleaned from speaking to a few technicians is technicians involved in higher education quite often end up doing the back end stuff, but just because of the sheer amount of work that goes on. Whereas other technicians who might work in sort of NHS oriented jobs do a lot more of the front end support stuff with the actual sims.
I think that kind of comes into like the difference between skills teaching and simulation teaching.
Okay.
Because primarily what we do is skills versus like skills training for students and such. And there is much more back end to that because it's about procuring the right equipment. It's about making sure that they've got the right number of this stuff. Like, where do we get it from? How much is it going to cost us? Just like the ongoing questions of how much are these sessions costing us to run per student? Like, we need to know all of this stuff in our like budget allocations and such. So there's a lot of that. And then obviously just supporting that kit on the day as well. Like if a bit of it goes wrong, it's a case of just trying to troubleshoot what the problem is, or then just quickly swapping it out with something else. And then obviously, the ongoing maintenance and such of that kit.
So before we get into the weeds, into the thick of it in terms of the logistics, let's go back to that why, because you kind of stumbled on it. Has your why changed as you've been in post?
I'll be very honest. When I started here, I sort of went, this would be good for a couple of years and I'm going to bugger off somewhere else. And I kind of got to that stage about 2.5, 3 years into the role. I was sort of getting a bit like, okay, I think I've done everything I can do here now. What's next?
Yeah.
And it just so happened at that time I was starting to have those thoughts that one of our senior technicians basically left the role. Which then, the stars aligned.
Yeah, because it is one of those roles, isn't it? That when you get a good technician in the role, it is then a case of filling dead men's boots, isn't it? Because people get comfortable and they're less likely to move on, particularly if they've developed their own kind of stamp on things and craft. Is what a lot of technicians do.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think there is like that preconception about technicians as they're quite reserved people and they like to keep themselves to themselves. And I think that's often why people then have this conception of, you're just these magical people that sit in a room and do everything. Whereas a big part of the job for me, which I have really enjoyed, is actually that more collaborative process. And I think one of the biggest reasons I've actually ended up staying here is not for the reasons I initially thought, which would be, it's like about technology, and it's actually about the people, and it's about the collaboration with those people to, at the end of the day, our kind of mission statement as a team is to deliver the best possible experience for the students. And that's primarily what we're here to facilitate. And if we can do that, then that's great. And I think the way that I'd like to approach things is very much through that collaborative lens.
There's been some challenges with the collaboration though, hasn't there?
And I think there always will be.
Yeah.
It's ongoing problems. But I think generally I've seen from when I've started to now, 4 years on, that things have really improved. People are much more receptive to
and
working with us.
I think if you were to give yourself a little bit of credit for that, Josh, I think you've definitely, as part of the wider technician team, been instrumental in helping that collaboration. Because again, I've been here for probably longer than I'd care to imagine. But it was very much a case of an us and them mentality at certain points in the past, where you would, as an academic, turn up, expect things to be sorted and almost have that magical element. You should know exactly what is going on in my brain in terms of what I want and require. And it doesn't always happen like that. And it definitely needs that collaboration.
I think your realization that essentially the magic happens in the simulation delivery because of the communication that you bring. And we've talked on the podcast before about simulation as a complex system and about how actually, the edges are jagged and it doesn't line up neatly. But the way that those gaps between, work as imagined and work as done get closed is through communication. And we talk about misconceptions of the simulation technician role. Being a people person and a communicator it is perhaps not what the general perception might be.
Yes, I would say so. As I was saying earlier, I think there's that preconception about technicians being these reserved people who like to keep themselves to themselves, and I think to an extent that is kind of true to an extent.
Yeah.
And that's why there isn't always this.
There's a natural allure, isn't there?
Sure.
Particularly when there's technology and kind of tinkering and things like that, which comes along with the role. It certainly appeals to my inner geekiness when you kind of get your hands on a bit of kit for the first time. And
Oh yeah, there's definitely fun in that.
yeah,
Definitely.
For sure. But you mentioned your mission statement being about delivering the best experience for students and learners. How does a simulation-based education technician affect the quality of learning for learners?
Big question again. I mean, we decide what kit you get.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the simplest way of putting it.
Yeah.
If you don't tell us what you want, you're not going to necessarily get what you need.
but it is hugely important, isn't it? You
Absolutely.
know, I'm sure you've been in a situation as an educator where you've turned up unprepared, and just how much that impacts your frontline support of learners. It has to be a well-oiled machine, doesn't it? And the technician role is a huge part of that.
I would say as well, I think there's kind of this argument of, we could just grab the kit ourselves and it'll be fine. But I think, again, that sort of focuses very much on the immediate problem, which is we don't have any kit. But then it's, okay, how do you store that kit? How do you maintain and look after that kit? These are all systems that we have to take into account. Because so we had an issue this morning with some of our CAE mannequins. They've got like a fluid line that runs through them. And the academic wanted to run some fluids through them, and they're all blocked. So clearly at some point, someone has potentially used them without saying that they've used them.
Yeah.
And because we haven't been told, that fluid has then congealed and blocked up that.
Right.
So now that mechanism doesn't work properly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why we need to know what's being used, where it's being used, how is it being used. Because this stuff is not only complicated, it's also very expensive.
Yeah.
And if something gets damaged, we need to know about it. And that's not because we want to get people in trouble. It's literally a case of we want to provide the best possible experience for the students. And if something does not work properly, it's often because we haven't been told that there's an issue or haven't been told that it's
and
broken.
when you don't have that transparency and when you don't have that collaboration, what ends up happening is people just look at the world through their own frames of reference.
Definitely.
So the academics are like, well, the technicians will never let us use that kind of kit and equipment, so I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then in doing so, make your life harder or for the person after them. And then I guess from the flip side of the coin, you're kind of, you can have your own technician biases towards people if we don't have that collaboration, that joined up conversation, that what's the common goal we're trying to achieve from this.
And say, I don't like to go into those because it's always awkward having a conversation with someone when something hasn't been done the way that you're expecting it to be done, or it's not in line with the school policy or whatever. But I never want to approach those conversations from you haven't done this properly and it's made our lives really, because it's not about us at the end of the day. Yes, okay, we're probably a little bit annoyed at you.
Yep. Because it's going to make more work.
Yeah, it makes your job harder, right?
And it makes our lives a little bit more difficult, but it's the impact that has on the students that ultimately is the problem. I remember a while back, there was a session that hadn't been booked in, basically, and they wanted to run a full ward simulation in the afternoon, which was running directly after a session that was already booked in the morning. And that ward session normally takes us a day to set up. And they were giving us about half an hour to set this up. Right. And I had to basically turn around and say, you cannot run this. And it wasn't a case of because it's impossible it was a case of it's impossible for us to actually deliver this. But for me, the point was, if you deliver this, it's going to be really bad for the students. Yeah. They're going to get a session that's not been set up properly, not been organized properly, and the outcome is going to be that they're just going to have a bad time. They may as well not do the session. Yeah. So the right thing to do in my mind was to find a different time basically for them to run that simulation session.
And that's really hard, isn't it? Because like being the person who has to turn around and say, no, that's not going to work.
It's not comfortable.
It's not comfortable, but it's actually, you're not saying no because it's going to make work for us. You're saying no because, actually we want what you want, which is that there's good learning for the students.
And actually the reality is the individuals involved in that uncomfortableness are the victim of a system which is failing. Yeah, and it's no one individual's fault. It should have been picked up at timetable.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also they don't have the understanding of the network of the system that you do.
I think that doesn't help things
because you're a subject matter specialist when it comes to the coordination, organisation, and efficient, smooth running of a simulation centre. Whereas, effectively, someone who's asking for this ward to be set up or any other simulation to be set up is a user that doesn't have an understanding of the complex system in the same way.
How has it been becoming a subject specialist, matter specialist? Bearing in mind you didn't have any healthcare experience before, so you're now in a world where you're dealing with these weird bums in boxes and limbs and things that are supposed to replicate.
Not sponsored by Limbs and Things, by the way.
For the slip of the tongue. But how has it been learning about all of those kind of things?
I've loved it. I say I love a new challenge. I love knowledge gaps. Not having, my aunt's a nurse, so I sort of grew up sort of around
so you had
around
a little
this
bit
environment,
of
but say lots of big words that I'm like, don't know what that means.
Yeah,
I'm going to play my piano. But it's been interesting. Definitely, I've really enjoyed the challenge of just being thrown into this environment where it's like, right, you've got to learn about catheterization and intubation and all of these very complex skills. I've sort of become a bit of a generalist in terms of if you asked me to cannulate someone, I could probably give it a good go. I wouldn't trust me with cannulation, but I could have a reasonable attempt because I've seen it done a fair number of times. I know what kit you need, and I sort of
But you've also been able to come in with a fresh pair of eyes and gone, well, why do you do it like this?
Absolutely, and I think that has been, when we've had new technicians join, I think that's always been like the biggest thing for me as a sort of now a supervisor to focus on with them is, how do you see this working? Because we have our own ways of working, and it's very easy to get stuck in your way of working. But having fresh perspectives come in and be like, why do you do it like this? And sometimes there's a very good reason, and sometimes you sort of take a step back and go, why do we do it like this? This doesn't make sense. And I'm always learning, even now after nearly 4 years of being here, which is still a scary thought.
So you mentioned earlier that you were on the precipice of maybe moving on to something different, and then the senior role came up. So talk to us a little bit about the difference between going from a technician to a senior technician role.
So I initially thought, this is going to be no different from what I already do. Like I'm sort of, because at the time I was the grade 4, I was very much focusing on the communications between people because I could see it was a problem. So that kind of became my extra step, I suppose. But actually going into the grade 5 role, I'm like, this is tough. There's a lot of unseen things that you have to sort of take on. Particularly, liaising with setting up new suppliers, for example, can be an absolute nightmare.
So it's more sort of the processes and
because you sort of the higher up you go, the closer you get to the red tape, and the more you have to engage with the red tape, and that can be the frustrating thing. And also, you're just responsible. You're more responsible now. It's a case of if that session doesn't get set up correctly, it's on you. If that person doesn't get the kit that they need, that's on you now. So there is that level of responsibility that comes with the role. I think just more so as well, my sort of week-to-week logistical presence is much more felt. So a lot of my time now, rather than setting up for the days, is more organising how are we going to set up for the days. And there's a lot more planning that goes into those processes.
So efficiencies and that kind of thing.
It's a lot of
team leadership.
Yeah, looking through an equipment list and going, okay, you've asked for this, and this session's asked for this, but we don't have that number of this. So how do we make that? How do we make that work? And it's getting people to talk to each other and to compromise, and you're sort of acting as a middle person within that. But the jump has been quite significant, and I definitely am still learning and adjusting because I've only been in this role for just over a year now. So I'm still learning all the time.
And I think it's good to be humble like that. I think we all are still learning to a degree, aren't we? I certainly am.
Oh, God, yeah. So one of the things that we talked about talking about on this podcast before we started filming today was we were going to have a conversation about fidelity and realism, because you talked about how your role is essential for allowing those learning experiences to take place. But we've talked a little bit about fidelity, and you mentioned something which I thought was really interesting before we started recording around computer graphics. So tell us about your take on computer game graphics and fidelity. Fidelity.
I was twitching then when you first said it because
Yeah.
those of you regular to the podcast will know that Lawrence and I have got our own gripes about the term. But
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to hear your views.
It was one of those shower thoughts that I had about 2 minutes before coming on.
Yeah.
And as you've already covered, you talk about fidelity all the time. And I sort of had this analogy of, it's a little bit like computer graphics. You have all these AAA studios now releasing these games that look incredible, but it's just the same game that they released 10 years ago. And just because it looks better, it doesn't necessarily mean it's more fun to play or that it's more engaging.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in my mind with simulation technology is okay, just because this mannequin looks better, is it actually better? Is it more fun? Is it more engaging? Does it improve the student experience? Like, not necessarily if it just looks really flashy, but it's unreliable. I think having stuff that just is mechanically sound is much better than having, not even necessarily mechanically sound, but just it's simple and you know how to interface with it, you know what it can and it can't do, and it works in the way that you're expecting it to, versus something that looks like it can do absolutely everything and it's this magical, product that can solve your problems. So it doesn't exist.
We obviously, our fidelity is faithfulness to the fiction contract. That's our definition, that we're on a crusade to continue. Yeah. For a lot of the equipment companies that you'll be dealing with, high fidelity often means more technology.
What does that mean?
Parts.
What does that mean for you
what's
guys?
That mean for a technician? You must be thinking, why can't we just have a basic that doesn't go?
I think it's the little things that come with this. So, am I allowed to say a product name here? We're not going to get sued. So the CE mannequins.
No such thing as bad publicity. Right?
Very true. So
I think we probably do need to correct that they're now called Elevate.
They are. Yes. So the Elevate healthcare mannequins, I believe they're still called the Aries and whatnot. They come with a sim stethoscope, which is essentially a little box about this sort of size, and it's really badly made. It's a flimsy plastic thing with a circuit board inside that attaches to an RFID tag reader. And that RFID tag reader basically then amplifies a speaker, which the stethoscope sits on top of. The thing for me that I hate about these things, genuinely, is the system of which you attach the stethoscope to the sim stethoscope with, because it's these two basic elastic bands that you have to sort of wrap around the top of the stethoscope. And if I ever see one of those undone, I'm just like, I don't want to deal with this for 3 minutes. But this is so.
Here's the other thing as well, though,
because when we were looking to acquire these mannequins to start with, that was a really good selling point for me. I was like, you can use any stethoscope, pop this little adapter onto it, and get these sounds that come through. And it was an allure. But
actually,
what workers imagine versus workers done.
Actually, when you have a student or a learner step into a simulation and they pick up this stethoscope with this kind of cankerous growth coming off of it, which is there to pick up the RFID tag, they're like, oh, that's cool. It's like,
or you don't get in the right area for the tag, so it doesn't work.
That's nothing like a stethoscope.
And we've looked at alternatives to this as well, and say one of them is this. It's an even bigger puck. It's about this sort of size that your stethoscope basically slots into, or actually might be like an all-in-one system. But anyway, the puck is it's a massive, chunky puck, and it's the same technology. It's this RFID tag reader, and so I just don't know how useful an RFID, how useful that technology actually is.
And this is the thing for me, is that so often this euphemism, which is high fidelity, is just there to mean high tech. And sometimes that tech is just not necessary. Like you said about, a good, mechanically sound. And I think by that, I completely get what you mean. You just want something that works.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want something that works. And I think that, the lowest effective technological solution is the right level of technology.
Absolutely.
The level of tech that enables the learning to take place is the right level of tech.
I mean, the amount of time that it can take to sort out these stethoscopes in the morning can be, sometimes you're spending 15, 20 minutes just connecting stethoscopes to mannequins because, this sim stethoscope doesn't connect to this mannequin. Okay, we'll have to find another one. And then you have to go through the process of trying to connect it. And then you've got to get somebody to test it. And then they go, it's actually not working. When
you have an issue like that, how much of that can you problem solve? Or is there a point where you're like, you can't use it? Or a point where you're like, right, we're going to go around and deliberately break all these now so that they're just out of action completely?
I have thought about that a few times. We've never done that. I would just want to say that it's tricky because we have sort of steps and procedures that we would normally take. Obviously, the classic, we turn it off and on again. The
old 240 volt reset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's 7 times out of 10 that actually does seem to solve the problem. But you can identify what the fault is quite quickly. Say if it's still not connecting at this point, or it's still not playing sound, you're like, okay, this is something that we probably need to actually take out of the simulation now, and we need to probably take a look, like a more detailed look at in one of our prep rooms. We sort of go through the steps. Sometimes we'll take things apart and see what the problem is and see if we can identify any physical faults.
Yeah.
And other times we contact the supplier and say, we've got an issue here, can you send us another one? And that can sometimes take 6+ weeks for us to get a replacement part. It depends on the object that you're trying to problem solve with, really. Because say some of our older mannequins, we have some mega code mannequins, and say normally it's like 2 issues. Either the boxes aren't connected to the mannequin properly, so you just disconnect, reconnect, or it's a syncing issue between the boxes. So with this, that's quite a simple, it's a much more analog piece of kit. So you can sort of identify what the problems are a lot quicker because there's less things to go wrong. Whereas with something like an Elevate mannequin, because it's got, probably 50 plus systems in it.
I think just for clarity, it's not just Elevate. It's anything
absolutely.
Which is high level technology.
I'm using their mannequin as an example because it's the highest fidelity mannequin the highest fidelity mannequin that we have.
The highest technology level.
The highest technology level mannequin, the one with the most bells and whistles that we have. And I think the more bells and whistles, the more things can go wrong. It's just the nature. It's the same with new cars, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Full of sensors. It's always a sensor.
Always a sensor. Yeah, exactly. And well, yeah, not in the case of my car at the moment, but hopefully let's not go there. So one of the terms that comes up a lot at the moment, there's an increasing focus, and I think it's to do with the change in the NMC standards around simulated practice learning. Like, I'd never heard the term simulated practice learning until relatively recently, and there is a recognition, I think, from the education community that simulation is a good thing and helps learners achieve outcomes. There's also, I think, in the NMC regs an allowance now for program teams to have up to 600 hours of simulated practice learning (SPL) in the programs.
How does that sound for you?
Yeah, what is the real world implications for a simulation technician team of delivering 600 hours of simulated practice learning?
I think just for our viewers and listeners, for context, we do have simulated practice hours in our current nursing program. It's about 240, I think, off the top of my head. So we're looking, if you went maximum, you're looking at an increase of about 127% or something crazy like that on top of what we do already.
Big number. It's really hard to say. Because
what is it that's complex about it?
Well, what's complex about it is that the guidelines are so bloody vague.
Right.
Like it's okay. What constitutes simulated practice learning? The way that I sort of have wrapped my head around the guidance is that it's about contextualizing the skill that you're doing. So rather than just sticking a cannula in a cannulation arm, it's you're cannulating a patient, and this patient has these conditions that you need to be aware of, and these drug reactions that you have to take into consideration. It's contextualizing the skill. And say, if I was to kind of simplify it into the frameworks that I understand, a cannulation skill session I'd say like a medium impact session, depending on how many people are wanting to do cannulation at the same time. You might have 12 arms across 2 rooms. Mm-hmm. So the setup of that is, medium impact. It might take you potentially an hour or hour and a half to set up all of those trays and get all of those.
So each individual arm trainer needs to be set up, needs to be prepped and primed. Yeah. All of the kit and equipment needs to go with it. So time consuming.
So that's time consuming. And then if you add this you need to contextualize that. the potential is that it has absolutely no impact on our setup because we're still just setting up 12 cannulation arms with cannulation equipment. So it might be 0. But if you're saying that actually no, contextualizing means that it has to be an award environment.
Right, so we've got to change the setting.
So now we have to change the setting. And okay, we need to have a patient in all the beds. Okay, so now we have to change 12 beds. We don't have 12 hospital beds, so that's not going to work. We'd have to change those at the end of the day. So that's an extra potentially half an hour.
That's a really important point because you might have 12 stations, but only 6 beds. That means that you've got 2 stations per bed, and now you've decontextualized it because now it doesn't matter where it is. It could be on a table. The
thing that strikes me is going back to your metaphor of computer games and graphics, like. It's a multiplier effect, isn't it? Like in some computer games, if you're doing something, you do it so many times on the trot, you get a multiplier. And the thing that strikes me is that in order to hit the criteria for something to be a simulated practice learning event, there's multiple multipliers.
Are you trying to gamify the NMC's?
I'm gamifying it. I am because it's a language that I understand. But so instead of having like 12 times 1, which is like 12 arms times one person to set them up. You've also then got to add the multiplier of the additional room. You've got to add the multiplier of the additional contextual information. You've got to add the multiplier of the additional team members in order to add that context. And that I think for me is why it sounds relatively straightforward. Well, we just double the amount of work.
From a logistics point of view, you then have to go, well, we can't timetable these in Singularity anymore. We have to block book because otherwise you could be setting up a room one day, then having to change it all, or even in the afternoon. Whereas a simpler way to do it, if you're using the multiplier effect, is go, well, actually this room is booked out for the whole week.
Yeah.
Skills don't get changed, minimal change around time. And it's about working smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. I think if you're changing what we already do, then the impact is potentially lower. It's still very high, and it's very difficult to measure what the impact would be. Because, say, go back to the cannulation example. If it requires every student to go up to their patient now and to talk through all of this stuff, well, you're not going to get through the same number of students in a day. It's just not possible. We don't have the space to do that because, as I've said, we've only got 6 beds in our ward. So you're immediately doubling the amount of time that's going to take to run through. And then,
I think your multiplier principle is a great analogy here, isn't it? Because the decisions that are being made at a regulatory or institutional level, by the time it gets down to the shop floor, to people like yourselves who have to sort it out, it has been multiplied significantly.
That's how it looks to me.
That goes into it.
Is that fair to say?
I think absolutely, yeah.
Because it's like we need to have 600 hours of nursing simulated practice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make it happen.
How?
Over to you.
And that's the frustrating thing for me is it does feel like an over to you, and it's like you've come up with the idea. You tell us how to do it. You need to have an idea of how this works as well. Increasing it by potentially 150% or roughly thereabouts is quite a daunting prospect.
I guess the kind of the bottom line, to sort of simplify it as much as possible, is that an increase of 150% in terms of simulated practice learning is not simply 150% increase in workload.
No.
Because of this multiplier effect.
Even that's
a terrifying thought, isn't it? 150% increase in workload, but it's not. It's more like an increase of several 10,000%.
Yeah, because of the complexity and because of the interactions between the various parts of the complex systems, of the complex system that is the simulation center, and it's really difficult, isn't it, to actually conceptualize it and communicate how and why.
I think that's why I'm struggling to actually put it into words, because it's kind of unfathomable. You're essentially asking us to change the entire way that this building works and this building operates. The way that we're currently set up really is that we have multi-purpose skill spaces, which means that we have the capacity and the ability to change around these rooms on a daily basis. So one day we could be delivering cannulation, next day we could be delivering catheterization.
For upwards of 12, 13 different professional programs, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be adaptable.
Absolutely. Whereas if you're then looking at simulated practice hours, I think that limits what you can then potentially do in a space. When we're running, say, if you wanted to run 5 ward simulations in a week, okay, that can only happen in 19A and B. That's our ward setting. So that's that room booked out for the week. And you're essentially then having to run the same session over and over and over again in that space. And it's you're then moving towards, okay, specific rooms for specific skills or specific sims.
Some places do that.
And some places do that. However, we do both.
Yes, exactly.
And you can't, I'm going to come out and say you can't do both.
Yeah.
And as we
alluded to earlier, how the technician role might be different depending on what organisation, but also what industry you're working in, whether it's higher education or in the NHS. There are variations between different organisations as well. So, yeah, having that one size fits all doesn't work in reality.
I think, again, it comes back to delivering the best experience for the students. I think you will be delivering a very haphazard. I think you've said this before, Lawrence. It's not about hours. You can't measure simulation in hours. It has to be about the quality.
Yeah, my line is always, I think it's difficult to measure learning in hours.
Yeah,
and I also think, you know, what proportion of that time should be spent briefing, what proportion of that time should be spent in action, and what proportion of that time should be spent in debrief, or even, you know, personal reflective contemplation after a debrief. Should that be included in SPL? And I think what would be really good would be to get someone on the podcast who is a simulated practice learning specialist and expert to really get into the weeds of what we're talking about here, because I think there must be a large number of programs, institutions and faculties kind of grappling with this issue and wondering how to make it a reality in an education, in a pedagogically sound way.
It's a complex systems issue, isn't it? Very complex.
Yeah. And it would be great to hear from you. So if that is you, if you are a simulated practice learning specialist, we'd love to hear from you, because it would be great to get some insight from you. So thanks for getting in touch.
I think we should. We could literally talk about this all day long.
Yeah.
But I think we should start drawing things to a close. So you've been in post now for, what did you say, 3 or 4 years?
It's coming up to 4 years in October.
Okay. What have been your insights into the role of the technician, and how it's firstly evolved here, but how it perhaps has made you grow and develop?
It has changed massively, say, since I started here. Obviously, yeah, we've got when I started, we were still sort of finishing up all of that building work and all of that project work. So we've now sort of got into a position where our team delivers a lot more training. So like our SMOT system, we have a rapid MOOC system, we have these iSimulates now, we've got these Elevate mannequins, and all of these do require a level of kind of sort of introductory onboarding for academic staff, because this is not technology that they've necessarily interfaced with.
I haven't used it in 6 months. Can I have a refresher? That kind of thing.
And that's something that we're actually currently looking at, is refreshers, not just for the use of the technology, but actually the use of the facilities and the spaces in this building as well, because you know, we have school policies in place for good reason of, you know, skill sessions finish by 4 o'clock and then you move into your debrief space, and that doesn't always happen, and often the people who sort of aren't following that are the people who aren't here most of the time, whether they work in a different building or they're more remote. And I think that's just familiarity, both with our processes and our building, but also us as a team. If they don't know who we are and who they're interfacing with, then that's a big problem. So yeah, that refresher training and those refreshers is to just kind of, hello, we're the technician team, this is who we are, I think is very, very important. Visibility, more than anything. So I think that's kind of where we're moving to next, generally. What was the other part of that as well?
Just what you've learned and developed. Maybe personally.
Patience. Things take time. I think when I started here, it was a case of, we see there's a problem here. There's an easy solution to that problem. Let's just do that. I think the procurement process was one. So when I started here, the procurement process to me seemed incredibly bad, if I can say so.
Yeah, of course.
What I mean by that was an academic would come to us and ask for a new piece of kit, and they'd say, "Oh, we want to buy this new piece of kit. Can you get it for us?" And it's kind of like, I don't know is the answer to that.
Surely this is a time for your magic hat, right?
Well, exactly. It's like, well, surely you can, you buy all this, you buy all the skills like consumables and such. So like, surely, and it's like, okay, where's the money for this going to come from? Have you applied for funding? Have you spoken to our simulation lead? Have you spoken to our school manager who holds the funds and the budgets and such? This isn't just a conversation that includes us. We can't just make that happen. So I would often say, oh, like you need to go and speak to these people, and they'd go and speak to these people, and these people would tell them that they need to speak to us. And it's this frustrating, it's not even it is a triangle, a frustrating triangle where everyone's just going round and bouncing between the points.
But that's
round in triangles.
Exactly. But that is, I think, because of this notion that as the simulation technician, you can magically solve everything. And I think what you've articulated over what you've said is that, yes, of course you are a generalist and you've got a sophisticated set of skills and you're learning all the time, but that actually you're part of a system that depends on other moving parts.
Yeah.
And I guess the answer, as you've said very articulately throughout, is more conversation.
Yeah.
Earlier conversation.
It's interesting, isn't it? It was the allure of the technology that brought you into this job. It's the collaboration and dealing with people, which has been perhaps your biggest challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that. I do. I really like just the challenge of having to speak to a new person who doesn't necessarily, because often I think there's that preconception that we then have about people of, oh, they're just lazy and they haven't bothered to put in their equipment list. And actually it's like, that might be the case, like one time out of 100.
Yeah.
But I think most of the time it's the demands and the pressures on academic staff to us are quite elusive. I say I don't know what an academic does during their day, but I think that's where I benefit from just coming in here and seeing that someone's got 700 emails that they need to respond to, and they've got these 4 students in placement who are really struggling.
Going back to your point, we're all generalists, aren't we? Really, in terms of things. And actually, I've been guilty of that myself. Try to model best practice and give you equipment lists ahead of time. Run out of time to do all of my equipment lists. Forget. Gets delayed, you get it last minute, and then it becomes and I think that's a transfer of problems to you. Yeah,
that's where my job becomes interesting, because I want to help people. That's kind of a big part of my job, is helping people deliver what they want to deliver. And it's having that conversation and saying, is there anything we can do to make this process a little less daunting for you? And we've tried to implement systems like our standard equipment list. So rather than going, right, I'm running airway, what do I need for airway? It's just, you click on that link, it has what you need for airway, you check it and go, I want that, please. You don't have to write it all down, and just trying to make your lives easier and the processes that we ask you to follow a little bit easier as well. It all helps.
Great. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, giving us a little bit of an insight on what it's like to work here in our simulation centre. I think that's just worth bearing in mind. And like Lawrence said earlier, and put a call out to maybe people who are involved in simulated practice learning. Again, if you're a technician and you run a busy organisation or a busy department, then if you want to come on the show and share your experiences, we'd be more than happy to compare and contrast.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Josh. And thank you all for listening in to this episode of Simcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next one.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.